you close that door?
Hi, thanks for coming today. Since we're talking about social media, we thought we would start with a fun fact about ourselves in social. I'm Ashley Terpstra, and my experience with social goes back so far that my Facebook login is actually my college email address. Some of you know what that means, okay.
And hi, I'm Christopher Spong. I'm our Associate Director of Social Media and Communications at Collective Measures. Fun fact, I once had the privilege of live tweeting from the orange carpet on behalf of a brand at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. I was fortunate enough to not get slimed during that experience, which thankful. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here and appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Social media has changed a lot since its inception. From Friendster and MySpace, who here wants to admit they were friends with Tom on MySpace. From Friendster and MySpace to newer platforms like TikTok and BeReal, the way in which we engage with friends, family, colleagues, and even strangers has changed. But you all already know this, and we're not here to break down every single change or explain what they mean. Rather, we're going to focus on the intersection of how social media has evolved and how consumer behaviors have changed as well. To start, let's look at our obligatory social media statistics. As you're already aware, social has become a big part of our lives, occupying a significant portion of our time, 143 minutes per day on average, in fact. It has also changed the way we behave online. Why use Google to sift through product and business reviews when you can quickly watch a comprehensive review video? And it's influencing our needs and wants as consumers. Show of hands if you've recently purchased something from a social ad or were influenced to buy a product endorsed by a content creator. Social media has, for better or worse, become a major part of us, a fact that has not been lost on marketers, which is why you're all here, right? Of course, we have social media companies to thank for this societal shift. They're the ones building, tweaking, and expanding the platforms to capture users and earn our ad dollars. Remember when social was mostly text and photo-based? Now it's impossible to think about scrolling through a social networking feed without a deluge of vertical videos. Because of this, social media's role in the marketing, advertising, and communications mix has grown. From social commerce and lead generation to brand lift studies and influencer partnerships, the role that social can play in our marketing mix has expanded. And as a result, advertising on social platforms continues to grow. Since 2019, ad spend on social media has grown 140%, more than doubling to reach nearly $250 billion this year. And ad spend is forecasted to increase by another $100 billion by 2029. So big numbers. Because of its ubiquity, and because of the content that users want to see, social has also become a place for brands to get discovered. From small businesses that operate almost entirely on social media to large enterprises looking to connect with new communities, social is at the forefront of discovery. Unfortunately, the social media frontier is no longer a vast, wide-open space where brands can easily and reliably reach their customers with whatever message is business critical at the time. Between celebrities, influencers, news media, athletes, creators, and even your Aunt Kathy, there is a ton of noise on social media. Despite how chaotic social can seem, there is a way for marketers to reach the users that matter to them and achieve their business objectives. To help shine amongst the clutter, marketers need to focus on the age-old marketing concept of the value exchange.
So how do you actually accomplish this? How do you bring value to your audience in a modern social world? There's probably some tactics that come to mind. You can throw a bunch of money at paid ads to get in front of new customers. And like Christopher's chart showed, there's a lot of brands doing this. You can invest in a new channel or hire an influencer to talk about your brand or your product, or you can create a bunch of content for your owned channels and hope that it gets seen. Well, none of these are wrong, but only focusing on one or a couple isn't keeping pace with the modern consumer mindset in social. Because consumers aren't thinking about paid ads or organic ads, and good influencers are seamlessly blending their own content with sponsored content so that viewers can enjoy and interact with both. We're all just scrolling, willing to stop on something that we find valuable in that moment. And so brands have to be sure that all of the pieces of their social presence are working together to be effective. But let's face it, social has become so big and competitive and so much a part of people's lives that it's pretty overwhelming. And marketers can get so focused on producing content and driving business results that you can unintentionally lose sight of what your audience finds valuable. So the challenge is to do something effective with social that brings value to customers. And this idea of focusing, or maybe we should call it refocusing, on the consumer requires a shift in a marketer's mindset. And in many ways, it's a shift back to just the basics of marketing. The scale and the speed and the growth that Christopher touched on has a way of blinding us with opportunity, so much so that we can lose sight of the consumer because we're wrapped up in what's a new platform, a new trend, a new capability. And by only thinking in traditional marketing frameworks like funnels or consumer journeys, we're at risk to lose people because we're not focused on how your brand can uniquely bring them something that they want or need.
So to help bring the shift in mindset back to your organization, we wanted to illustrate how you can determine what it is your consumers want or need from you, how you can provide them a valuable experience, and how a holistic social strategy will help you capture them where they are. So you probably already know that you need to listen to what your customers have to say, but you may not know where to start. Knowing that you need to do this and then actually doing it are, of course, two different things. Fortunately, there are many different ways in which marketers can listen to customers, which I'll touch on shortly. And while many of them involve data that can be collected and analyzed, listening is really more of an art than a science. Oftentimes, listening is most effective when we read between the lines to understand what's driving conversations, what's triggering customer service complaints, or, like Audrey touched on, what cultural factors are affecting consumer mindsets and perceptions. Listening is most effective when we can understand the context in which something is said. Okay, so you know why you need to listen, but do you know how to listen to what consumers are saying? As marketers, we have access to many different tools that can give us insight into the wants, needs, and emotions of consumers. Through social listening tools, we can tap into conversations that consumers are having with their peers. By analyzing keyword research and assigning emotional triggers to the keywords, we can understand how searchers may be feeling when they're looking for specific information. There are also audience research tools like those Abby and Heather talked about in their breakout session, competitive tracking platforms, and our friends on the customer service or sales teams that can tell us what our customers or buyers care about most. On top of all of this data, there are the cultural and macroeconomic trends that Audrey talked about, which can help us paint a bigger picture to understand why consumers may be feeling a certain way. I know this can sound like a lot, and it certainly can be, but when it comes to listening, remember that some is better than none. So how do we take what we've heard from consumers and translate it into meaningful insights? This is the fun part. To start, we take one or several data inputs and attempt to understand the emotions and needs behind them. In the examples here, where we'll pretend that we're marketing for a snack food company, we have some data that shows us the key seasonal moments when snacks are discussed the most, a Reddit post from a concerned parent in the r/toddlers subreddit, and several people also ask questions triggered from a search query about snacks for toddlers. Reading into these, we can detect feelings of frustration and guilt, which may correlate with changes in seasonal schedules. As the parent of a toddler, I can completely understand. But in our role as marketers for a snack food company, we can translate these feelings into content and campaigns that provide value. Now that you know how to listen and you understand what consumers feel and what they need, you can then offer what they value most. When we, Collective Measures, talk about developing content that meets the wants and needs of consumers, we refer to it as providing value. Our definition of value is self-explanatory. It's something that's valuable to the consumer. But value for our audiences comes in many different forms, including informational value, entertainment value, monetary value, emotional value, and you can even come up with variations or combinations of these depending on your vertical. By understanding what consumers want and need, we're able to develop content and campaigns that deliver value in a meaningful way. This, in turn, allows us to better earn the results that we're looking for, whether it's simply brand engagement or a business impacting objective. Bringing it back to our toddler snacking example from earlier, by understanding that our consumers, parents, feel frustration and guilt over getting their toddlers to eat healthier snacks, we can develop content that acknowledges and pays off these feelings. Perhaps we offer tips, start a toddler snacking resource group, or share testimonials from other parents who have faced similar challenges to let them know that they're not alone.
Okay, so you know what people want or need, and you know how your brand can uniquely provide some type of value that's authentic. That's the part that can give you some clarity amongst all of the social noise. So now you have to figure out how to put all of the pieces together to have the opportunity to give them those things in different places in a way where one will support and reinforce the other. And there's some foundational work that needs to be done before you can just start executing that outlines how a brand's presence is applied across the social ecosystem. And that connected experience can best be accomplished through a holistic social strategy that's inclusive of 4 key areas: social identity, social content, influencer, and paid. Having this foundational work is going to ensure that your brand has a consistent and thorough presence in all of the places where a consumer might encounter it, and that you have a plan for how to measure it. So let's go through a simple example for illustrative purposes. Many Midwesterners can relate to this. It's late September. I'm in the market for new snow boots. Is that too soon? Probably. I might discover a boot brand through a variety of ways. Maybe there's a paid ad that reaches me because of my location, the fact that it could snow at any moment, or I am getting an ad based on other competitive brands that I interact with. I might see a boot company with an influencer that I follow where they're talking about them. I've got some value now here because I have choices and variety to choose from. I've discovered some new boot options. Or I might gain informational value if this influencer is talking about their truth, their honest opinion about the warmth and the comfort of the boots. And maybe one of these interactions entices me to start following this company and check out their vibe and their differentiators. Or maybe I already follow this brand, and as winter approaches, I'm now seeing some of their boot content. All of these examples are really just ways that a person can encounter a brand, or ways that the brand might try to break through or disrupt my social feed. And those buzzwords are something that we marketers are very familiar with and frankly get a lot of pressure from to try to make a difference in social. We use the funnels and the customer journeys and the customer wheels as we're planning our interactions, and these are all totally valid tools. I love funnels. People know this about me. But we also know that people aren't necessarily following a linear line straight through a funnel, especially on social, because there is so much noise and the algorithms that are really, really good at anticipating what we want every time we open that app. So instead, we'd like to suggest that a modern social strategy should really be more like a net, where you're capturing people's interest with various forms of value while they're scrolling and discovering. Today's consumer has social so interwoven into their lives for various reasons. And they're going through a unique journey, or probably multiple unique journeys, professional, personal, all of the different hats that you wear, all at the same time, all in a nonlinear way, not thinking about what's paid and what's organic. So rather than relying on one piece of social to do all the heavy lifting, all of the aspects should be working together to provide consistent support that provides the value they need to take the desired actions. So back to Christopher's toddler snack example, these are all just tactically ways that we can execute to get in front of customers and that ways that they'll interact with our brand. And they all need to be present to keep people engaged, and ideally these should be grounded in those 4 pieces of the holistic social strategy. Because if you're lacking any of these areas, you essentially have a hole in your net. And that's an opportunity for people to drop off or perhaps be scooped up by a competitor because they're not finding value in that moment. We'll fully admit we are simplifying this a lot and making it sound very easy. We know it's not, and there's a lot of reasons why a holistic social strategy often doesn't happen. You can let me know if these sound familiar. Could be your team structure, the budget, never. Just knowledge gaps of different platforms, as well as the time it takes to not only create but continuously manage content and campaigns. So the barriers are real. But the good news is it's worth it if you can do this. Focusing on what your customers need and how your brand can uniquely provide appropriate value gives you a filter and a direction forward. And the benefit of this kind of thinking is that it's a very symbiotic relationship. Brands will gain value by creating value for their customers. Not just the obvious monetary value like sales or leads, but brand affinity, intel into your customers' motivations and needs, and even the white space that you can move into to drive a business forward, both within social, but also beyond social. Social can be a goldmine for testing and receiving timely and relevant learnings that can fuel broader marketing as well as business decisions.
Okay, so let's take a moment to recap what we've talked through today. Social media and consumer behaviors have changed a lot, and in the modern era of social media marketing, success requires more than launching a campaign or simply testing a new channel. To stand out, marketers need to refocus on the value exchange. To do this, you need to listen and learn about what your customers want and need. You then need to take these learnings and provide them with a valuable experience. And finally, you need to leverage all of the channels at your disposal to reach them where they are. Thank you. We will now take some questions if anyone has them, and then after that, you're free to leave, I think. Oh, well, yes.
That's true.
You can hang out. Nicole?
I have a question for somebody.
Yeah, we have a
Love it.
microphone for you. Hold on.
I fully realize this may be difficult to answer in a couple sentences, but when you look at the way that all of these or social channels work together, paid and organic, I would love your thoughts on the best way with all the data pieces that we have with engagement and audience segmentation. How do you start to look at those two different executions and understand a content strategy between the two? Especially since when you're in the channels themselves, people aren't necessarily understanding what's paid and what's organic, but what I'm looking out of them or looking for the audience to receive or do is different.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as I love organic social media, I do recognize that it's not as big of a thing as it used to be. Paid is definitely required in this modern age. I mean, the algorithms themselves have deprioritized organic content. That's just something we have to contend with. In a lot of ways, I kind of think of organic as the sort of catch-all that if someone were to come to our channel, or if they already are a really engaged follower, or we know that they've purchased in the past and they follow us, that's really the content that's geared towards them. Versus the paid content, that's the kinds of things where we're looking outward, we're seeking others, we're trying to disrupt, we're trying to capture them in our nets. So it is intended to like be different and behave differently. So in that sense, we do try to distinguish our content strategies between those audiences and say, okay, if someone is not aware of our brand and we're reaching out to them, what is the content that they would find the most valuable? As opposed to if someone already is aware of us, likely because they're following us on social media, what would they find value? Are they looking for something new as opposed to something like new to the brand? Like a new product as opposed to new to the brand? Kind of like the boot example that Ashley was talking about. That's often how I would distinguish those things. Of course, then you can always test between all of these different channels to determine what values are most important based on those different audiences and based on the tactics that are available. Often when it comes to organic social, we're evaluating based on engagement and how we're engaging those core audiences. And we recognize it doesn't always lead to the sales that we might expect from the paid side of things. But that engagement is still really valuable to us as a brand because we're able to learn a lot about what our consumers care about and what we can provide value for them. Does that make sense?
Oh, so good, yeah. I think there's work that you probably do beyond social too about like where you sit in the industry and your competitive set. And to Christopher's point, that prospecting message of like, hey, we're this brand, you should check us out. And then knowing that someone is going to go do their research, learn a little bit more, learn about what the vibe and the differentiators are, that's your place to kind of back up. Now that you're here, let me tell you a little bit more about why you should stay, sort of a thing.
That's a good way to put it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll just yell.
Okay.
Hold on. We'll do it in the mic just because there's people online and they can only hear you through the mic. Sorry.
I want to follow up a little bit on Nicole's thought. So through a couple different organizations, I've always been surprised by the pounding for more organic content. We need to make more content. It's going to go by. And even of your followers, maybe 5% of your followers are going to see the content. Why do you think organizations are still, is it kind of go back to the days of like build it and they will come and like, and like in 2010, 2012, 13, all these brands were like, oh, I can build these huge communities, these social communities that are going to have huge payback. I get a little lost because my take is like it's important for all the reasons. Like people are going to come there, you want to get a sense for the brand. Mm-hmm. It's a way to nourish relationships that you already have. But when you're talking about growth and prospecting and bringing new people in, it seems so much of the conversation is about content creation that if you're not boosting it or putting a lot of paid behind it, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense from a use of your team's time. I would also love to hear other people's perspectives of that because I feel like when I say that, people are quiet and like polarizing, and I don't understand why it's polarizing.
Yeah, I think you might consider it polarizing because there's really a spectrum. There is the idea of less is more, or like we're going to create really high value content, but we're only going to do a couple of pieces per month or whatever. That's the idea of like, each individual piece of content that we create is meant to like be a lot. And then there's the other end of that spectrum, which is creating as much as we can. Now, I think the trap that people fall in is measuring those two things the same way. Because if you're doing, fewer pieces of content, but they're meant to like do more each, quantity over quality type of thing, that, you can measure those individual items and say like, oh, okay, here was our engagement right there. Oh, here's what, in terms of referral traffic back to our site or sales or whatever, versus when you're producing lots of content and you're really just trying to promote discoverability and like that consistency of publishing frequency, then you might want to measure things more in total. So caring less about individual pieces of content and more about, in total, did we earn a lot more from this? So individual engagements or individual like referral traffic might be less per piece of content, but in sum might be more. Does that make sense?
I think too, like it's a good point because just like you can totally have a hole in your net by missing something, you can also totally overinvest in a piece that's not worth it, and then therefore you're putting all of this, employee time and effort into all of this content, not sure if it's working, but oh, hey, by the way, like we should be focusing on paid ads to reach out, to your point. So it's really a balance, and it's a great point that you shouldn't be making it just to make it. There needs to be a plan for it. You need to be listening to what people want, know how your brand can intersect with it. It doesn't matter if there's a trend going. You don't need to make that content necessarily if your brand can't give value to your audience at that point. So it's definitely something you should, again, look at holistically to make sure that you're not over-investing your time in something that could be potentially shifting to round everything out. Mm-hmm. Good question. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Feel free.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, I believe we'll still wait for the other breakout sessions to wrap up, but feel free to engage with one another. You can come up and ask us questions. I think they'll mute the mic, so you don't have to hear me over and over again.
But appreciate everyone coming today. There's no official wrap up here, so it's our job to say thank you so much for coming on behalf of the whole agency, and we hope to see you soon. Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course.
No, that's okay.
No,
go
for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, just thought of something.
Okay.
On social platforms like LinkedIn, I work more in the B2B space, so that's an area where we are a lot. We've been starting to invest in our time in things like the top reads, the newsletter options that are now available by company channels. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and is a fruitful activity, best ways to go about getting the most out of that tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I think, another example of within one channel, the difference between creating a lot of content, like just publishing posts, and then rather investing resources and time into developing more of like a newsletter format or something that may have higher value to the people engaging with it, just based on how it's shown and how people are exposed to it and how much depth you can put into that content. So then you need to balance out like, okay, how frequently are we doing this? Are we getting the juice from the squeeze from it? Is it worthwhile? And even then, what are our buyers or our customers or our B2B audiences, what value are they getting out of it? Are they engaging with us more because of it? Have any of them referenced it in maybe conversations that they've had with salespeople? Has it produced leads? All of those kinds of measurements. Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a fun and unique beast. One area where we see a lot of investment in trying to develop content that's valuable is by focusing on like executive thought leadership. So having leaders within our client organizations focus a lot of their own time and effort, usually with us in the background supporting, focus a lot of their time and efforts on building their own sort of brand in that sense, and then that positively represents the brand that they lead or whatever.
They're an influencer in that B2B
Yeah,
space, right?
yeah, in that sense. So yeah, in that regard, then we're able to look at the types of people that are then engaging with that type of content and say like, ooh, hey, this is really great. Like we could have a salesperson reach out and say, hey, I know you read our executives post about this, or I know you read our newsletter about this. Did you find it interesting or whatever? Yeah. Great question.
Okay, thanks for real this time.